entry that I can find on the Bridgespan Group was written in 1988. So when I was running the San Francisco office of Maine, I called it the Make a Difference Company. 1988, 1996 is when I had a Bain team start analyzing the nonprofit sector, so 8 years later. 1999 is when we launched after getting some funding, getting IRS approval, and now it's 2008. Now, did I know that seed was going to grow? No, I had a bunch of other seeds. But that's the disciplined reflection. And then, boy, pay attention to the opportunities, pay attention to instinct. Yes, sir.
What do you think are 2 or 3 of the most innovative, best-run nonprofits?
Oh my gosh, what are 2 or 3 of the most innovative, best-run nonprofits? It depends on what field, and this is a complicated question to answer because some of them, they are phenomenal nonprofits. Aspire Public Schools and charter management organizations, extraordinary. Much bigger organization, Teach for America, extraordinary. Somebody was talking to me earlier about KIPP Academies, extraordinary. It depends what space. In the environmental space, there's phenomenal organization. Nature Conservancy is really big. I'm on the board there, so I care about it a lot. I think it's got enormous. So it depends. The things to look for if you're trying to identify a high-performing nonprofit are first and foremost the quality of the people. Do they really have outstanding people, in your opinion, in the leadership roles? That includes the board and includes the senior management team. Are they clear-minded about their strategy? Ask them, what is it you're holding yourself accountable for? That's one of those powerful questions if you're a nonprofit. What are you holding yourself accountable for? You can test those things. You can test whether or not other people are responding to them. Are they healthy financially? The things not to look for are things like the overhead ratio, which is useless. So say, well, they have high overhead, therefore they're bad. That's stupid. I hope airlines spend a lot on maintenance. That's good overhead. So doing due diligence, perception matters, judgment matters. You can get a point of view about the really great ones. And it's like business. There's a top 10% of companies that are just outstanding, and there's the bottom 50% are just okay and mediocre. And the top 10% of nonprofits are outstanding, and the bottom 50% are mediocre. Yeah.
Can you go back to that moment, I guess, in 2000 when you announced that you were going to leave to form the Bridgespan Group, and you said 2 or 3 of the partners kind of came and said that, are you sick or is there something wrong with you? So I guess the question is, how do you stay true to your kind of beliefs and your goals when you might have self-doubt from in a specific situation like that, or what was the kind of mental analysis that you did?
Great question, and I don't want to in hindsight make it seem cleaner than it was, because it was a messy. I was really messed up in the following way. I'd been working on the business plan, I got it going. We actually started Bridgespan before I announced I was stepping down. And those 2 things happened to coincide, but they coincided because I had a term coming up. And so the managing partner has terms, and I could have gone for another term, and I didn't. So there was a little bit of serendipity there. When Jeff Braddock left Harvard, he was running it. So all of a sudden we got 3 or 5 people, and it's starting to click along. And I'm spending half my time there, but not all my time. I'm finishing a book, I take a sabbatical. During that phase, I received some really exciting and interesting potential offers to go run companies. And it wasn't obvious to me at the time, because I thought, okay, this thing can, maybe I should go run an internet company. But I kept coming back to life like this. And I kept asking myself, I don't know, I think I was 44 at the time, and I kept asking myself, if I only had, which was a question somebody else asked me, the power of the right question, if you only had 10 years to live, what would you do with your life? That's one of those interesting questions kind of to ask yourself at any point in time, and hopefully you all have many decades to live. And my answer to that is if I died without doing anything for public service, I would feel my life was not well lived. And I didn't buy into this learn, earn, serve thing that, okay, I'm going to wait till I'm 60. And so I was at an intersection where I either doubled down on that bus, the business bus, which could have been Bain or could have been someplace else, or I took an off-ramp on a different trajectory. And for whatever reason, in my heart of hearts, I'd been thinking about that different trajectory for years. My dad was a factory worker. He taught me, I remember the phrase, it's not what you have, it's who you are. It's not what you have, it's who you are. So I wasn't keyed in on, more is better. I actually think, I personally feel that if wealth can be given away in one's lifetime, to the extent you have wealth, that's the right thing to do. But that's my personal value. And but I struggled because it wasn't obvious. And the peer pressure, or at least the apparent, the feeling of peer pressure was enormous because I was getting off the bus on a stop and go in a different direction. And if the general view, and this is part of a trap of business, is you're building a resume, not building a life, and to build a resume, you go from 3 people reporting to me to 10,000, and a net worth of this to a net worth of that, and an apartment to a small house to a big house to 2 houses, and that's how it goes. Then the way it looked like to people is I was doing that. And whoa, something must be wrong because people don't do that. And I'm not saying it's right for everybody. There are all kinds of different lives. This was just my life, but I was not going to let go. And people say, well, you can't afford to take risks. We had a young family, can't afford to take risks. My view is you only have one life. If you're thinking about life this way, whether it's Wednesday using that little structure I had, or whether it's Saturday, it's still this way. And how can you afford to not to take risks? It's not it's not a test drive. This is it. There's no going backwards and hitting the reset button. So eventually, I struggled. I struggled because I said, geez, should I be doing that? But you eventually come back to whoever you are as a human being, which is why getting anchored in that first question of what's success for me, what matters to me, what trade-offs and choices do I want to make so important. Question? Yeah, Lewis. And then
you were kind of the model of this book, balancing your life. Can you talk a little about open up more, if you can, about kind of balancing that personal side, and then also kind of enjoying? I mean, you talked about this sprint. There's ups and downs. You always got to be focused. You got to be taking advantage of opportunity, but really also just kind of enjoying the moment and kind of living that life day to day.
All right. So balance and enjoying the moment. I'm not on the latter one. I struggle and have throughout my entire life enjoying the moment. I think I enjoy a lot of moments, but I'm also pretty intense. And so I'm kind of, and I'm task oriented, so what am I doing next? So Karen is great with me on this, and I've learned to enjoy the moment. She teaches me to meditate a little bit, and but it's not how I am naturally. And so that's just me. I know that. It means I have to take time out and make sure. On the first year question on balance, again, the 3 or a couple of principles that are hugely important is, one, you have to have a sense for success at any phase of your life, any time, both now and in the future. That tells you what trade-offs you're willing to make and you want to make. You say, I've got a 3-year-old child, I am going to be home. Or, I've talked to people, parents who say, I just want to be home when they're in middle school. Younger years is not as important to me. Those are explicit, just making that explicit in the context of your life. And then it's all about this stuff. So, it's tactical. It's little stuff. It's tactical. So, for example, at Bain & Company, people wouldn't take their vacation. You have whatever weeks of vacation, they wouldn't take it. So we instituted a policy where it's use it or lose it. Because people weren't taking it. And even then, people would lose it. Well, hey, if you don't have the courage to take your vacations, well, too bad. So you draw lines in the sand. I draw lines in the sand. I'm not working on weekends. I'm not going to the office on weekends. Excuse me. I was always reading stuff, do emails. But I'm not going to the office on weekends. And I started Bain in 1980 full time. I don't think I've been in the office on weekends, Bain, Bridgespan, or anything else 10 times. I will not do it. I just won't. People want to come to my house, that's fine. People want to have a telephone call, fine. I'm not doing it. I keep track of every single travel day. I keep track of every day that I'm home after 7 o'clock. I keep track of how many nights away and what's causing it. And I can give you the data going back in a year. I say, okay, doing stuff, there's a bottom 20% there that I shouldn't be doing. So it's just discipline. It's like exercising. People hit diminishing returns on work. More work is not necessarily better. Sometimes you just need to do a project good enough, to your earlier question. It doesn't need to be perfect. So we overdo stuff because we're afraid of failure and afraid of getting negative feedback. And so a lot of it is just saying, gosh, I've got to be able to have the same investment in certain aspects of my life that I have in work. A metaphor to think about that is imagine you're kind of in the middle, you're a piece of metal, and you've got these magnets around. The work magnet is gigantic. The work magnet is like 10 pounds. And you're this little piece of metal. And it goes, shoo, that's where it wants to go, shoo, every time. Nobody at your boss can say, you're working too much. You interview people, and I say, what's your biggest weakness? Well, I work too hard. Give me a break. Then that's a problem. The way to think about it is you have to have other magnets. So tactically, you not just do the defensive thing, like I'm going to take my vacation, I'm not going to work on weekends, whatever lines in the sand you want to draw. You create other obligations. You put them in your daytimer. You put them in your Outlook. They're an obligation. You got to go there. Anyway, just do this to yourself. Don't be victims. Don't say the environment. It's never the environment. It's us. Yeah. And then I'm sorry, you and then you. Sorry.
How do you say no effectively?
It depends how do you say no effectively. Really good. It depends who you're saying no to and what the context is. So you got to be thoughtful about that. If you're a new employee and the chief executive comes to ask you something, and boy, it requires some special activity you don't want to do, you might think twice. If it's a colleague, somebody you know well, you say, are you sure that needs... A tactical way to influence a conversation is to ask questions. If you're ever in a conversation where you want to really influence the outcome and you want to do it in a way that the person feels like it's their outcome, you start asking questions. Don't make statements. Statements are like, saying I won't do that is not always the best tactic. Saying, well, Tim, tell me more about what you need. Tell me more about, is all that equally important? What about just this part? I prioritize those 4 things you just asked me to do. Which of those would you like me to do really well and which maybe not as well? Start asking questions. Start asking questions. And pretty soon you'll unpack it. Because chances are who's ever asking you to do it hasn't thought about it. Because you're a free good. Right? You're a free good. Your time is free. This is one of the dilemmas with work. Your time is free to the institution. And they'll take more of it if they can get it. It's not free to you. So ask questions, push back. And then ultimately you have to say, hey, listen, boss, my family's been planning this vacation for 8 months. If I can't take my vacations that are planned 8 months in advance, maybe this isn't the place for me to work. And maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't.
You spoke about your wife several times. How do you...
Got lucky. I really got lucky.
You can offer some advice or insights on how to balance, your definition of success and your goals for self-improvement with your spouse's.
Okay. The question is how to balance, your definition of success with spouse. I'm not sure I'm the right. My wife was a TV producer. I was on the air. She was earning, when I met her, she was earning more money. She's definitely wiser than I am, more thoughtful on a lot of dimensions. And the only answer I can give you to that is communication. In relationships, we didn't talk about it here. Communication is the oil that makes the engine work. And most of us don't communicate that well. You don't talk about a relationship, it's like communicate. Well, when you're run on the fly life, most of us don't communicate that well. And most of us define communication as broadcast, not receive. So what do you mean? I told you that. It's not about telling. Communication is not about telling, it's about listening. And so communication is about shutting up, which is kind of an interesting concept. None of us have the problem of over-telling. Most of the time we don't have that problem. We have the problem of under-listening. So it's just thinking, and it's making the trade-offs. Meg and Griff are just an amazing story because here's this guy who's phenomenal brain surgeon, one of the best in the country. Here's Meg, arguably one of the best chief executives in the world. And, they've moved multiple times, and they talk about it a lot, as near as I can tell, and they've sort of taken turns. So she's followed him, he's followed her. But it's complicated and it's situational, and you just try to do the best you can. The thing is, you want open communication so the other person in the relationship feels like they're being heard and treated fairly. It's a trust, respect, caring thing.
2 more questions.
Okay, let's see. Vic and then you.
We talked earlier about the importance of negative feedback, and I think it's human nature to judge who's sitting across from you, giving you the feedback that you're receiving. And so I'm wondering how do you avoid falling in that trap of discounting the feedback you're getting?
It's a great question. So how do you avoid falling trap? Here's how I've done it, is I write it down. Because what you want is you actually want to learn about yourself from multiple camera angles. So you may see me from one camera angle. You may not have the world cornered on great insight about Tom Tierney, but you might see something other people don't see. So what I don't want to do is reject the data. I want to write it down. I want to make sure I capture the data. You're going to see me from a different camera angle. You might say something else. I want to capture the data. So I'm putting together a composite of myself. And then I process it. The thing is, and as I said with both the Meg anecdote and the managing partner anecdote, the formal and informal feedbacks, I slept on it. In case of that first feedback from Bain, it took a month. And I can follow my journal. I went from, whatever anger, depression, denial. I mean, whatever those phases are, I went through them all. And then finally said, you know what, this is right. Pieces of it are right. So you want that compositive, and some people's motives are not perfect. They're not actually trying to help you, they're trying to make themselves feel good. So you just have to, it's a composite photo, and it's a moving target, because you're a little bit of a moving target. The person you are 10 years from now is maybe not exactly the same in all ways as the person you are today. So that's the answer.
Last one.
Yeah.
So we're all going to be starting jobs first years, juniors, and we'll make a good impression, working tons of hours. And we want to have some balance. If you want to do things like go to lunch with your wife on Friday, or go to the gym 3 days a week, it takes a little longer, never work on Sundays, do you do that off the bat and risk them thinking you are lazy, or do you gain their respect first and then put those, routines in place?
It's a great question. Let me answer it in a broader way. Goldman Sachs has this great phrase called culture carrier. And they promote people who they feel are behave in a way consistent with what they want to reinforce as a culture. So for example, at Goldman, and we researched them in that book, Aligning the Stars, it's about we, not me. It's the firm, it's the clients, and so forth. So it's an unselfish orientation. Not that they aren't individual, they are, and they're very competitive, but it's unselfish. So part of the answer to your question is, what's the culture like? Because if you're in an organization where the culture is, you get there at 8 in the morning and you leave there at 8 at night, and anybody that doesn't do that is thought of as kind of, unusual and not performing, you have to be thoughtful about it. You have to be thoughtful about it, because you do need to establish your reputation. Especially in those first couple of cycles, the first couple of years. It's like the kids in grade school. The teachers know who the A students are after the first week. You want to be thoughtful about that. So in general, I'd say be cautious. That said, you can be cautious in the context of the culture. Being cautious doesn't mean being blind. It doesn't mean, forfeiting everything for the good of the company, in part because you got to put your mask on first. You've got to take care of yourself. And you simply won't be as good. You'll be on the diminishing return side of your own performance curve if you don't exercise. If you aren't spending time with your spouse, significant other, if you're not, taking time off, you just can't perform well enough. So sooner or later you're going to mess up, and that'll come back to hurt you. So, the answer is yes, you want to be thoughtful about it, but that doesn't mean black or white. I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to chat with you today, and wish you outstanding luck in whatever ways you all define success. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you all for your questions, Tom. On behalf of the school and our class, once again, thank you so much for taking a little bit of your Saturday morning to share with us. So once again, thank you very much. Okay, we are adjourned. See you next time.